There's a very particular kind of heavy silence that falls over the writer's room at Studio AH inside Rockefeller Plaza right before a script gets locked in. It's the sound of a line being permanently drawn. And on May 2nd, 2026, that line wasn't merely crossed. It was torched beyond recognition. Picture yourself sitting inside that legendary studio, the same stage where every American president and global celebrity has been honored one week and mocked the next. The atmosphere. The red on-air sign glows overhead while Colin Jost, longtime Weekend Update anchor, leans toward the microphone. But this time, there's no trademark smirk on his face. Instead, he stares directly into the camera, through the lens, and into the homes of millions watching. Then he delivers a joke that, just 3 years earlier, would have detonated his career overnight. He doesn't refer to the Duchess of Montecito as royalty, not as a humanitarian, not even as an actress. Instead, he uses a label that normally triggers instant panic from network standards executives. He frames her as part of a hostage crisis. More specifically, he drops the T word while describing the British government's handling of Harry and Meghan as though they were some kind of insurgent threat. The audience didn't simply laugh. They exploded. It was a roar of release, the sound of an entire public finally exhausting its patience. But this is the crucial detail people miss. SNL does not operate on accidents. Nothing at that desk is improvised recklessly. Every word spoken there passes through layers of approval from senior writers and NBC lawyers whose sole purpose is protecting the network from lawsuits, which means someone high up the corporate chain, someone responsible for safeguarding billion-dollar interests, reviewed that hostage joke, saw the T word, and still approved it. Why? Because they already knew the audience would defend the punchline. The viewers had been waiting for someone to finally say the quiet part out loud. Within 36 hours, that 9-second clip was replaying across major news networks from London to Sydney. It became the moment the entertainment industry's protective armor around the Sussex brand finally cracked apart. But to understand how things reached that point, you have to rewind to the slow-motion collision that began the night Harry and Meghan said, "I do." Most people assume the ridicule started after the Oprah interview or after Spare hit shelves. They believe public opinion shifted once audiences became exhausted by the constant victim narrative. But if you follow the timeline carefully, the story is far more deliberate than that. Go all the way back to May 19th, 2018. The world was still mesmerized by a lavish royal wedding worth millions. The orchestra swelled, the gospel choir dominated headlines, and American media outlets were preparing to crown Meghan as the ultimate modern success story. She was framed as the Hollywood outsider who had conquered the world's most exclusive institution. But on that exact same night, while the royal reception was likely still unfolding at Frogmore, Michael Chi stepped onto the SNL stage and dismantled the fairy tale in less than 10 seconds. His opening line landed like missile. Today, Suits actress Meghan Markle married some unemployed guy who still lives with his grandma. Think about the timing of that. On what was supposed to be the peak of Meghan's global image, the biggest fairy tale moment imaginable. America's most influential comedy platform reframed Prince Harry as a jobless man living under his grandmother's roof. And it wasn't only a shot at Harry. It was a warning aimed directly at Meghan. SNL was effectively saying, we aren't blinded by the titles, the flowers, or the royal carriage spectacle. We see a fading institution and a man without direction. That was the first signal that American audiences were not nearly as dazzled by royal branding as the Sussex PR machine expected. This wasn't a media honeymoon period. It was the beginning of an 8-year examination of a public image built on unstable ground. By 2019, the fractures were already widening into canyons, though only a few people recognized it at the time. This was still 2 years before Montecito's public grievances became headline material. The dominant narrative then revolved around the Fab Four and the illusion of unity between William and Harry. Yet behind the scenes, SNL writers were already scripting the royal breakup long before it officially happened. That April, Emma Stone hosted a sketch called Royal Baby Video. On the surface, it looked harmless, just another parody home movie. But underneath, it was an incredibly sharp autopsy of the monarchy's future. The sketch featured Kate McKinnon, arguably SNL most lethal comedic performer, portraying the late Queen. With her signature deadpan style, McKinnon looked at the pregnant Meghan and remarked, "You're half American, which means you're half traitor." The audience reaction wasn't ordinary laughter. It was shock mixed with nervous recognition because the joke felt dangerously close to something nobody in mainstream media was prepared to openly admit yet. But the most unsettling moment in the sketch wasn't even the "a traitor" line. It was the portrayal of Kate Middleton by Cecily Strong. They showed Kate as a woman imprisoned by centuries of rules, forcing a smile while saying, I follow every strict rule and she doesn't, and somehow people adore her for it." The SNL writers had already identified the "a cool outsider" image for what it truly was, a ticking time bomb. They understood that Meghan's refusal to conform wasn't going to spark some glamorous revolution inside the monarchy. It was going to end in exile. They aired it on national television during prime time, and not a single person, not Buckingham Palace, not even the Sussex loyalists, managed to pressure anyone into retracting it. The half-traitor remark quickly became shorthand among royal watchers for everything that was about to unfold. Then came 2021, the year of the Oprah interview. This was meant to be the Sussexes' ultimate checkmate. They presented allegations of neglect and revealed that discussions had allegedly taken place about the future children's skin tone. The narrative was crafted to place them beyond criticism. And for a while, it worked. Media outlets became terrified of questioning them because nobody wanted to risk being branded insensitive or complicit. But sympathy in the entertainment world has an expiration date, especially when the stakes are this high. Just 1 month after the Oprah special, Daniel Kaluuya, a Black British Oscar-winning actor, hosted SNL, and by then the protective shield was already beginning to crack. Kaluuya confronted the controversy head-on. He walked onto the stage, pointed to himself, and joked, "I'm Black and I'm British. Basically, I'm what the royal family was worried the baby would look like." It was an incredibly sharp piece of comedic reversal. By turning the move to America into a joke, he removed much of the tragedy surrounding the narrative. And he kept going. He followed it up by saying British racism is so severe that white people ended up leaving. In other words, he reframed Harry and Meghan's dramatic exit as a comedic premise. Suddenly, escaping the palace no longer looked like a brave, heroic act. Instead, it became a punchline about two people supposedly too fragile to remain in the country. That moment opened the floodgates, because when someone with Kaluuya's background and credibility laughs at your escape story, the victim narrative begins losing its grip. The audience realized that if Daniel Kaluuya found the situation funny, then maybe they were allowed to laugh too. And from that point onward, the laughter never really stopped. As 2023 arrived, the tone evolved from subtle satire into outright open season. The release of Spare handed comedy writers enough material to fuel years of content. And SNL didn't just mock the memoir in passing. They built an entire parody universe around it. One of the most memorable examples was a fake British rap sketch titled "A Milli Pounds and Shirty," featuring James Austin Johnson and Devin Walker. The lyrics tore apart the couple's new California lifestyle with surgical precision. They joked about a Prince Harry starting over at Tyler Perry's house called like Ben & Jerry's, but the audience completely lost it at the line, "Harry, Meghan, Ronald Reagan, interracial dating queen said." Not today, Satan. That phrase didn't remain confined to the sketch. And not today, Satan immediately escaped into internet culture and became the go-to response whenever Meghan announced a new lifestyle venture or Netflix teaser. But the real damage came from how they framed Harry's transformation. SNL contrasted the image of a once prominent royal prince with the reality of him living as a guest in Tyler Perry's mansion. The contrast itself became the joke. It erased whatever remained of the royal mystique and replaced it with the image of a Hollywood-dependent orbiting celebrity circles. This was also the period when the a grifter narrative truly began sticking, and SNL was helping cement it into public consciousness. Sometimes visuals land harder than words ever could, and toward the end of 2023, SNL delivered a visual gag that Meghan's PR team arguably never fully recovered from. It happened shortly after the Wales family released their Christmas card, the one that sparked tabloid headlines because of the infamous Photoshop mistake where Prince Louis' finger appeared altered. In reality, SNL transformed it into something far more damaging for the Duchess of Montecito. Colin Jost paused perfectly, looked into the camera, and deadpanned. Meghan Markle says she has a finger they can borrow if they need one. Immediately afterward, the screen cut to a fake version of the Wales Christmas card featuring a pixelated middle finger edited into the photo. It was savage. Elegant in execution and brutal in implication. In barely 12 seconds, SNL managed to turn the Photoshop princess discourse into a joke about Meghan's alleged bitterness and hostility toward the royal family. It didn't matter that she had absolutely nothing to do with the edited photo. The damage came from the association itself. National television had now linked her image to a giant middle finger aimed directly at the monarchy. And that particular joke hit differently from the others because it condensed years of complicated royal drama into one crude visual. It communicated that regardless of the American Riviera orchard branding or the charity initiatives, a large part of the public now viewed Meghan as someone metaphorically flipping off the institution that elevated her status in the first place. Then came 2025, when the comedy escalated beyond royal family drama and entered the territory of geopolitics. The framing shifted from a family conflict to international inconvenience. This was the year of the infamous trade deal joke. Picture the setup. President Trump announces a major trade agreement with the United Kingdom. Under normal circumstances, it's just another political headline. But Colin Jost took the story and twisted it into commentary on Harry and Meghan's growing image as people without a true home base. He joked that the only condition Britain demanded in exchange for the trade deal was for America to keep these two. The crowd reaction was absolute chaos. And if you stop for a second and really think about the premise of that joke, becomes even more brutal. The implication was that Britain, Harry's own homeland, was supposedly so eager to keep distance from the couple that it would hide behind a billion-dollar trade agreement just to avoid taking them back. The joke framed them as a diplomatic, hot potato nobody wanted responsibility for. This is where all the awkward, unanswered questions surrounding their lives started circling back around. Why weren't they prominently included at the coronation? Why did they seem absent from state dinners and royal functions? SNL essentially handed the audience its answer. Because in the show's framing, they had become a burden. A royal world tariff nobody wanted to pay. And once comedians start suggesting your own country would rather outsource you to another nation than welcome you home, the image of being a celebrated global icon starts collapsing in real time. They had transformed into a political liability, too complicated even for experienced diplomats to navigate comfortably. Now, this next part is where things become genuinely dangerous from a PR perspective. Because in media culture, perception is often shaped by association. You become defined by the people your group decide. And over the last few years, SNL has started doing something very deliberate with Harry and Meghan. They began placing them in the exact same comedic segments as Prince Andrew. Now, to be clear, we're discussing SNL framing here, not making allegations ourselves. But in February 2026, after Andrew faced renewed legal scrutiny and fresh accusations tied to his past associations, SNL delivered one of its sharpest transitions yet. They joked about Andrew Island, mocking how he'd become a disgraced contact buried inside politicians' phone lists. Then, in that exact same Weekend Update segment, they pivoted directly into the Meghan a hostage situation joke. That structure matters. Because the bookending itself is psychological. By placing Meghan and Andrew within the same comedic rhythm, the audience subconsciously files them into the same category. Damaged royal baggage. How did a woman who entered one of the world's most beloved royal institutions, backed by enormous support from the American media establishment, eventually become the centerpiece of a hostage joke on national television. Some people will argue it was simply bad luck. They'll say the tabloids were vicious or that the royal family was distant and unwelcoming. But if you follow the SNL timeline closely, one thing becomes impossible to ignore. This wasn't bad luck that dismantled the brand. But it was a chain of decisions. It was the decision to transform a private family conflict into an international media spectacle. It was the decision to rely on explosive accusations and emotionally charged revelations for attention, only to discover that once every secret is exposed, there's nothing valuable left to market. SNL didn't randomly stumble into mocking the Sussexes. They documented the collapse step by step in real time. First came the unemployed duty joke in 2018, then the half-traitor line in 2019. After that, the racial controversy monologue in 2021. And eventually, by 2026, the hostage joke. Over the years, the show carefully tracked the transformation from glamorous outsider to perceived diplomatic burden with almost surgical accuracy. And the audience followed that trajectory alongside them the entire way. Meghan can release as many polished Netflix promo shots as she likes, but she can't edit the response of a live crowd in a Manhattan studio. She can't silence the writers inside 30 Rock. And she certainly can't stop the transatlantic wave of satire now coming from both the American and British sides at once. For comedy writers, that's great news because the material keeps replenishing itself. For the Duchess, it's the opposite problem because the material always circles back to her. 8 years ago, she entered the public imagination as the heroine of a modern fairy tale. Today, she's become the T-word punchline used to open comedy segments. And when people wonder how the brand deteriorated this badly, they don't need insider palace memos or leaked strategy documents. They just need to revisit the Weekend Update archives. The clip numbers tell the story. The endless replay loops across Sky News and international media tell the story. On both sides of the Atlantic, SNL has essentially turned chronicling the Sussex brand decline into an ongoing comedy franchise. And unless something fundamentally changes, unless the narrative shifts from victimhood to accountability, that's exactly where the couple will remain in public imagination. An endless punchline. The Andrew Island bookend. The hostage situation America no longer feels interested in negotiating with. And if you really want to understand the moment that cracked the foundation underneath all of this, the Trump trade deal joke that gave Colin Jost the setup for his 2025 monologue and ultimately paved the road toward the May 26 hostage punchline, then you have to examine the prequel to this entire SNL saga, because the connection between those two moments is deeper than most people realize, and it exposes just how far the diplomatic burden narrative had already spread behind the scenes. But for now, the red studio light has gone dark. The audience has headed home. And somewhere in Montecito, Harry and Meghan are left replaying the clips, trying to figure out how a fairy tale slowly transformed into a 3,500-word punchline.